Hi everyone. I've got some ornaments here, some clay pieces that I rolled out and I texturized, and now I'm getting ready to decorate them, so I thought I'd tape and show you what I'm going to do with them. So I've got some here that are baby oriented. I just had a new grandson, so that's what I was getting ready for. Although some of these I did with a paisley rolling pin, so they're more girlish versus boy. But I think what I'll do is just antique them and make them kind of vintage. So I'm going to use Color Stroke 681. This is an old bottle. This says PSP, which is what these used to be called, but they are called Color Strokes now. Okay. 681 is nutmeg. It's like an old vintage type look to it. So I'm going to take my large Sumi brush. You can find all of these products and brushes on our website. I'm going to wet that brush, and I'm going to keep it kind of wet. In other words, I'm going to thin that down a little bit. Let me move some of these back out of the way. And I'm just going to create a wash, basically, is what I've done by thinning the color down to apply over. This is 04 bisque, but this is white porcelain. So this is going to be fired to cone 5-6. So the colors change, and this is a Color Stroke, which is one of our opaque underglazes. It's going to change a little bit. Sometimes the greens will brown out. The Color Strokes are more opaque than the color concentrates. So I wanted something, and I'm leaving it on there while you can see, while I do the edges, which I probably don't need to do because when you wipe back on this, it's gonna take some of that off anyway. So I use the opaque one. We are going to use some concentrates in a minute on some of them. You know, change it up, see what you like, but you could use any of them just straight from the bottle as an antiquing just by slightly thinning it. So I'm getting down inside the little holes where I'm going to string this with a ribbon. Okay, and then we're going to take a damp sponge, wet it, or take a sponge and wet it, and then wipe back the texture, so wipe across the detail. And it's going to give a rustic or an antique look to it. And you can wipe back as much as you want. If you want more of that color out of the background, you can take that out. Then you could come back and paint the edges if you wanted. Since this is going to be hanging on a tree, I am going to go ahead and put some of that same color on the back. This one I did stamp with my initials and handmade. I had a couple of custom stamps made that I could put on my pieces. And same thing, you can wipe back on that if you want. I did leave the texture on the back of these. I didn't take the time to smooth it out. It just has the canvas texture. Okay, so you can, like I said, get a vintage look. We'll do some more and put some blues on it because I just had a baby boy grandson. Okay. Okay, so since I've got some leftover color here, I am going to go ahead and do this little carriage baby stroller. Use up what I've got out. And of course I need more. And once again, I'm adding some water with my brush to slightly thin that product down. This is nutmeg, which is Color Stroke 681. I did the same color on that. It was like a tray that I did that had some poppy flowers on it. It was beautiful. I really like the vintage or old. And it's a color that goes with any. If you don't know someone's color theme, you know what they like, this is one that you could get away with and not have to worry about it matching. It goes pretty much with anything. I just thought this was fun. These cookie cutters got off of Amazon. They have multiple baby. You get the rattle, the bib, the carriage. You get a bottle and a onesie. I think that's all of them. Yes. So that's kind of fun. So since I have a new grandbaby, I thought I would make ornaments for the grandparents and great-grandparents as a keepsake, and parents, of course. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on the back also. And some of these I left texture on, some I didn't. Your choice. But that way the back is finished with something. Because it's going to be hanging on a tree. It's going to be moving around, possibly, you know, twirling. So it needs to have a finished look on it. Now, I know I have one, or I've got two more here with that same paisley pin on it for the texture. But I think I'm going to go ahead and switch to a blue. And let's see what I've got here. I'm going to use Denim blue. Always shake your color concentrates or your color strokes. Remember, they are in a gel base, and so they congeal. Again, this is one of my older bottles, but it is 642 Denim blue. So the PSP is an old label. When I bought the company back in 2006, everybody kept calling them PCP, and I got tired of correcting people, so I changed. PSP stood for Professional Studio Pigments, so I ended up changing the name just because I didn't want to have to correct everybody all the time. Once again, I'm going to thin with some water, large. I am going to set these out of the way just because I don't want to take a chance of splattering blue on them. I did wipe down these ornaments with a damp sponge to remove any dust. I like that color. So this would still work for a boy, even though it's got the paisley, but maybe whoever you're giving it to has that theme, the vintage type theme, or they like that in their home, and maybe that would work better than doing like the sweater knit that I've got there. And let me come in just a little bit closer. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do the edges. You could do multiple colors, which I am going to do on one of them because I thought about, I've got ornaments here, I've got Christmas tree little dishes or trays, and so I'm going to do some different things. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and do the back. The longer you leave the color on, the darker, or it's going to absorb more into that porous clay. Did you know that there's, on your palettes, there's these little nibs here? If you lay your brush between those, it'll keep your brush from rolling, which is kind of nice. Sometimes I forget about it. Again, wet your sponge, wring out the excess, wipe across your texture. And I'm just using a round I call them a replacement sponge, these cheap sponges that you can get from any of your ceramic supply places. And keep rotating your sponge so that you remove the product instead of moving the color around. So constantly rinse your sponge. And then just check your edges, see if there's anything you want to touch up. I think I'm good. So that's kind of pretty. So there is a blue one, and there is the nutmeg. So this is 642 denim blue, and this one is 681 nutmeg. Now, since they're ornaments, you don't even have to glaze them if you didn't want to. There's a little bit of glaze in the Color Stroke products, so it'll have a little bit of a sheen where it may be heavier. But if you want them glossy, then definitely you could go ahead and glaze them. So I'm going to do both of these since they have that paisley pen. Add a little bit of water, kind of mix that up. Just by adding the water, it allows it to flow and get down in the crevices of those textured areas. If you didn't have a texture, you wouldn't need to thin it down. You could just paint on. Don't put the color strokes on the bottoms of your pieces, which I just did, but I wiped it back, so it shouldn't be heavy enough to make any difference. They do have a little bit of glaze in them, so make sure that you have kiln wash shelves. Make sure that you've put down, I like to have kiln wash shelves, and then I put down alumina hydrate, it's hard to say, which is just a dusting of it. I put it down and I take a big soft brush and kind of move it around on the shelf so that it's very, very thin. It's like sugar type thickness. I mean, it's very, very super fine. Sugar, salt, probably sugar. Salt's a little heavier as far as the grain. You can hardly see it on there. Okay. Get my sponge. Of course, you could, I guess you could stilt these if you were unsure about them. Constantly rinsing that sponge. You gotta get the color off of it, because otherwise you're just moving it around, not removing it. And I'm constantly changing the area that I'm using. These were the first ones I did with these cutters, so it was kind of just of an experiment just to see what they'd look like. I do have a couple of this type ornament with that same pen, and I really like this blue. So I think I'm going to make one of them for me. Just to show you, not on the baby motif, what you can accomplish. I have a piece, it's like a crumb in there. There we go. Get rid of that. Now, these are porcelain, but you could do them on your earthenware, your 0406, and do it the same exact way. You could glaze both sides with a clear, and then you can stilt them so that they're glossy on the front and the back. if that's what you want. But being an ornament, you could do them in the matte finish. That may go with your decor, your tree theme more than a gloss. Some people just like matte finishes. Constantly wrenching your sponge to remove that excess. A little bit back in there. Isn't that pretty? Still think I need a little bit. Alright, I'm going to leave it. Okay, so keep working on those. Now let's do, maybe we want, let's do one of these sweater. Get one that's got a better, kind of that sweatery rolling pin. I don't remember whose, that could be one I got anywhere. The sweater one, I think, is Jessica Putman Phillips. Don't quote me on that. I'll try to put a link in the description for that. Okay, so let's go back to the color concentrates now and pick some blues. You know what my favorite blues are the ceruleans, the 150, 151, and 152. Okay, those are my favorite colors. 150, 151, and 152. Again, shake, and I can use these also on my, I want to use it on my snowflake piece. So the color concentrates do not have any glaze in them. They're thixotropic, meaning they congeal and thicken until they're shook up or stirred. And you can hear them as I'm shaking them. They liquefy. I'm also going to put out 144 powder blue, which is a lighter blue. It's lighter than the light cerulean. And I may throw in some peacock blue. I'll see. I'm not going to put it out yet. So once again, and you can, if you've got the Sumi brushes, they work great for doing these washes. Here's large, medium, small, and I don't know that I have a mini out here. I'm looking. I don't see one off the top of my head. Okay, so I'm going to switch because I want a little more control. I'm going to go to the medium. I don't want to be in such a large area. Once again, we can add a little bit of water to our brush. Turn this around so you can see. I've added some water to my brush to kind of thin one side and just brushing on a wash, because when you add the water, it's going to make the product thinner, and then it will flow down in the crevices. So I'm just kind of hit and missing. Then I'm going to go to my light cerulean. Again, I've added a little bit of water. Oops. Got my brush in the wrong one there. Saw blue and went for it. Overlap these colors. I think you'll have a better effect if you do that. It'll be a better transition from one to the other. Once again, a little bit of water to slightly thin one area. Now, when I do the darker color, okay, I'm actually going to put a little bit of water. I've got so many spray bottles that have alcohol in them and different things. Alright, so when I'm going to do the darker, I'm going to take some of that dark and add it to the water. Because if you tried to thin down that whole puddle, all that I've got out there, it would take forever. A little bit darker. Constantly stir. If you create a wash like this, remember your color is heavier than your water. It's going to fall to the bottom. So you constantly need to keep that stirred up. You can make it stronger. And just by going over an area, it will be stronger because you've added a second coat of that color. See, I'm just kind of running it across and it starts to flow into the crevices. Watch this. It just kind of self-antiques. I don't even really need to wipe this back. We can, just to see what it's going to look like. But I'll probably go back over it. We'll see. Here we go. It's just going to make the knit a little bit lighter. Constantly change your sponge. Okay, so it can just be very light and subtle. I think I'm going to go back a little bit more with this lighter color. And then I'm going to wipe that back. Very cute. What do you think? Needs a little dark right up there. Just to kind of balance it out, we'll put a little bit on the edge there. Then you could come back and paint the very edge if you wanted. I'm going to just take the wash of that dark and put a little bit of color on there. Now, on the backs of these, I want to put the baby's name and birth date, because you're making a keepsake, hopefully. If you're selling them, your customers could write, on them with a magic marker, just like a Sharpie. Okay, and then I think I'll do the darker wash on the back also. And I'll just let it flow into the canvas texture that I left on here. All right. Okay, I'm going to let these dry a little bit before I do the names and stuff on the back. And of course, it's going to go on better if the back is smoother. I did not smooth out any of these, but you get the idea. Okay, so let's do, this little guy has got snowflakes on it. Snowflake texture. Okay. So once again, you can use any of those blues. Maybe you just want, I think I'll use just the ceruleans and leave off that powder blue. I've added some water to my brush so that it's thinner. It tends to fall into those crevices and it helps with the area that I want to antique. Water in my brush. This one is, that was light cerulean. This is cerulean. This is kind of my test before I do my big one. I want to see what this looks like. Always good to test things. And I'm going to go back to the wash of the dark because it is so dark. Maybe add a little bit more color to it for this particular little dish. Now, where those colors overlap, you can come back and kind of mush and muddle those colors just to kind of make them blend. And I'm just going to use the 151 cerulean on the edges. So I'm allowing that color to kind of seep in and absorb into the clay, which is going to give me a darker antiquing. All right, here we go. So we're going to wipe it back. The snowflakes will be lighter and the color will stay in the crevices. A little bit more back up here. I did wax the foot of the piece, so I'm going to go ahead and just apply. Remember, these are color concentrates that I'm working with now, which are translucent underglaze or transparent. So pretty much what you see is what you're going to get. But if you wipe it back, it's going to be a lighter version. So I put it on here, but I am going to wipe it back because I want it to kind of look antiqued like the front. You could paint a solid color on there if you wanted. But that way I don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be solid. There's a reason. But I am going to touch up my edges and just make sure those are a little bit on the opaque or more solid finish. Okay. Cute little dish. So this is probably 4 inches or so. You can see it up next to the brush. It's a little over halfway. So it's probably 3 inches across and 4 inches tall. Alright, and I've got an ornament here that has snowflakes on it. Maybe I just want to use one color. This is the 151 cerulean, the middle value of the ceruleans. This is really easy, you know, for the kids to do. They could put whatever colors they want on it on there, and then show them how to wipe it back. Simple and easy. make some ornaments, some keepsakes, make them for mom and dad. Depending on how deep your texture is, it's going to stay in there. I'm going to let that one sit in there for just a minute, and then I'll come back and wipe it. My texture isn't as heavy there. Okay. Move some of these out of the way for them to dry. Okay. Once again, put it on the back. Now the color concentrates, which is this, you can put it directly on your kiln shelf. You may get a flash of color or a shadow of color, depending on how heavy you have it on there. But it's not going to stick to it.